Hi, and welcome to the September episode of More or Less. I'm Peggy, and I'm here today with Brian and Cody. How are you today, Cody?
I am doing very well, and I thank you very much. This podcast was brought to you today by Baker Orthotics and Prosthetics, and we are here for all of your orthotic and prosthetic needs. Please give us a call with any questions, concerns, or if you'd like to schedule an appointment, 817-332-7313. Today, we are talking about a
It's a heavy
let's
topic.
say let's just say it's been swept under the rug and ignored
Yes.
by a lot of people. We're speaking about opioid use or any other type of medication, really just those things that we tend to go to for alleviating pain, alleviating stress, alleviating uh, that which comes from an amputation, a limb difference. And so we want to dive into this. It's a very sensitive subject. We're going to be very careful with it. And we know that this hits people very deeply. So be forewarned, there may be some things that can be triggering in this episode. I'm going to turn it over to you now, Peggy. And
Also, want to remind people that you
mhm.
should never stop taking a medication based on anything that you hear in a podcast. So please, please, please talk to your doctor before you start, stop, change, modify anything that you are taking. Talk to a doctor. But we are here today to talk about opioids. And Brian, I really do appreciate you being on our podcast again. I know you're a great friend to More or Less. You've been on the podcast before. And Cody and I really just wanted kind of another person to bounce this topic off of so that we have a wider range of experience and a more robust dialogue, because this is a hard topic. When I was doing the research for this, I found out that opioids are prescribed more than 3 times the rate to amputees as they are to people without disabilities, right? So 3 times the rate we're getting. So let me see what else we have. Unfortunately, so we're getting opioids more, which makes sense in a way because there's a lot of issues sometimes that can accompany a limb loss and an amputation. Obviously, we're not talking about the immediate post-op period. Everything that we're talking about from this point forward, assume that we're talking 6 months post amputation forward. Anything before 6 months, we're not talking about use or misuse, although obviously you can misuse drugs during that period as well. But we're talking about um, 6 months out because that's when it's determined that from a post-operative perspective that the opioids are no longer really required. Um, 85% of amputees say that they can easily get a prescription for opioids. And I mean, I agree with that. I could just call my doctor and get one. I've gone to the doctor and I've had them just offered, oh, do you need a refill for phantom pain? And I'm not on anything. So I didn't need anything. And I was a little surprised that it was being offered so freely in this day and age. But so what do you think, Brian, about the accessibility factor? And do you think it's easier for amputees to get the prescription? And why do you think that is?
I would think that it is easier. Just my a thought that I just had was, when I was reading the or listening to you, amputees are prescribed at 3 times the rate of people without disabilities. Um, and you're talking about the ease of it. I just wonder if there's a degree of sympathy from the
Hmm.
doctors or whatever, because I don't think they know, and I think everybody's like, that must hurt all the time.
And that's actually what I found out in another report. They polled doctors to find out, why are you prescribing these opioids so much to individuals with it was lower extremity amputees for some reason was the focus of this study. Um, and I don't remember the number, but it was a wide majority said because they don't know how to treat of residual limb and the issues associated with an amputation. They
Yeah.
feel woefully out of their element. These are family doctors who want to treat their patient. Their patient's coming in pain. This is what they know to do for pain. So I think from, if we're going to really look at the opioid issue with the community, one of the first things that I think need to be addressed, and obviously we're not going to be able to do that today, is educating doctors on there are other ways to deal with amputation issues and limb loss pain and phantom pain than opioids. And if you are going to use opioids, amputees especially need education on the risk of that.
Mhm.
That I feel like pills are still handed for pain, and there's no true counseling as to, be aware that there could be a risk of addiction. It can happen without you knowing, really. It's something that can happen slowly over time. Watch for these things. I was reading different tricks that if you are truly concerned about opioid use, but you truly need them, is some different tricks that you can use to keep yourself accountable. Is have somebody else count your pills to make sure that you're not taking too many. Apparently, you can just go to your pharmacist and they'll count your pills for you. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought that was a really, really smart idea, assuming that you don't have a family member who's going to take your prescriptions, which is another issue in the limb loss community. Is that not only are we getting these prescriptions, but we are giving them out. I'm trying to find the stat for it. I have it. I will find it. But we're sharing them with people. We're giving them to friends and family,
Towards the bottom.
and selling them. And I thought that was interesting, but I think that goes back to the lack of income and things like that.
I think it's 12.3%.
Thank you. I couldn't find
Yeah.
it.
Hmm.
I appreciate that. But there are ways we understand what my main concern when we talked about doing this podcast was coming off as judgmental, because that's the last thing that we want to do. We recognize that medication is needed by some. We recognize that pain is a very different experience for everybody. And my phantom pain, Brian, is, I'm sure, wildly different from yours, which is going to be wildly different from Cody's.
Right.
I'm not on anything for phantom pain. I'm very, very fortunate. I have been on in the past, and there's no shame in that.
No. And the phantom pain, like in my legs, is not that big a deal, but in my hands, it's it's real. And I don't know that it's different than it is in my legs, but my legs is bearable. My hands are not so much. But I've also, I don't want to say experimented, but you're prescribed this much gabapentin.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, can I take 2 instead of 3? Most days, yes. But there are days when no, you need to take everything that you're prescribed.
Right.
And I don't know. I don't remember being on opioids. I mean, I'm sure that I was, but I was in the hospital for a long time when I got amputated. So by the time I got out of the hospital, I was off of that. So
I was so fortunate. I don't know how I did not become addicted to the medication that they prescribed me. Before my amputation, I was on a concoction of methadone and Percocet for pain
yeah,
every day.
I mean, you had a lot of pain before your amputation,
I
right?
did. And I had my amputation, and then one day I just decided I didn't want to take them anymore, and I stopped. Don't do that. Don't do that. Very, very dangerous. And I mean, I like was sweating for 2 days and really, really antsy and just felt weird. And it was like hour 50 in that I realized that I was probably going through withdrawals.
Mm-hmm. So how was
And
the pain?
at that point, do you know what? It hadn't changed.
Okay.
Yeah. So at that point, I was taking the pain medication because it was prescribed.
Mhm.
And I was afraid that there would be pain. So if my doctor's going to give it to me, I was going to take it because I didn't want the pain. I didn't know. I knew what I was living with on the medicine, and I was afraid of what it would be without. And I think that a lot of amputees and people living with chronic pain fall into that situation, um, and are afraid to stop taking the medicine. But I stopped hour 50. I realized I was in withdrawals and just called my doctor. And at that point, he told me to just ride it out. Um, but if I hadn't decided that I just didn't want to take them anymore, theoretically, I mean, I'm sure the doctor would still be prescribing them. Probably not the methadone. They probably would have stopped that eventually. But um, the thing is that I'm very fortunate that my pain wasn't to a level where I needed the medication anymore. But for a lot of people, the pain is very, very real. And relying on these opioids, I think it's a hard situation because not only are you using a medication that is highly addictive and dangerous, but you need it for pain, but there's also a lot of judgment. I think that there's a lot of you don't want to tell people what you're on for a few reasons. There's shame, which I think is a natural emotion, but I don't think it's justified. I don't think anybody needs to feel ashamed of needing to take medication, but I do think that like any other, even with mental health medications, if you're taking something for depression, I think people are very hesitant to kind of talk about it. And that's one of the reasons that opioid abuse and misuse has become such the dirty little secret within the disability community, is because we're not talking about it. We're not talking about the ease of access. We're not talking about how easy it is when you're having pain to just take 2 pills and, oh, that didn't work. And it's, oh, well, I'm supposed to do it every 6 hours, but it's 5 hours and I'm hurting. I'll take 2 more. That's how it trickles. That's how it snowballs. Um, and I think people really need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Cody, I'm
Yeah.
curious because you work in the clinical setting. Do you see from a just the bird's eye view, seeing patients coming in and coming out, are you seeing issues with opioid, or are most people kind of functional? Are they talking to you about it? Do patients say, hey, are there options out there for instead of this?
I will tell you, I've seen varying degrees. I've seen folks who have needed it. I've seen folks who have gone to the abusive level, and have displayed the symptoms of being actively using opioids, um, and they don't have necessarily the pain. They would say that. I would tell you right now, you can look at their history and see that you know everything looks normal under X-ray, everything looks normal under MRI. There's nothing telling there that's saying they are actually having this pain. And so it's been 20 years of experience and I've seen it, like I said. um are people talking about alternatives to it? Yeah. A lot of folks try to get more involved in community activities, branching out and making their lives filled with more purpose. They're participating in recreation, so they're going to the gym, they're joining clubs, you name it. Those are some of the methods that people are seeking out. I've seen um, uh, meditation. A lot of people are meditating.
They are,
We
and we
actually
have
have, yeah, go ahead, just tell them.
in our whole person community, we do have curated phantom limb pain meditations. So if you're having issues with phantom limb pain, we highly encourage you to hop onto Whole Person and download those great audios. I also
And
read that acupuncture helps. I've never done acupuncture, but I have read that some people are turning to that instead of opioids.
yep, I've seen acupuncture. I've seen, um, I've even heard of someone who's tried hypnotism. Um, Goodness gracious, there.
So
I
what that
always
also
recommend that
tells me is that there's a lot of people dealing with a lot of pain out there.
there are, and I will also tell you there are people who seek out a faith. There are people who seek out therapy. Speaking to a counselor, speaking to a psychologist, can help with, you know, understanding why you look to the medication, um, for relief in
Hmm.
some cases, right?
Well, they said that if you were a binge drinker before you had your amputation, you were 4 times more likely to develop an issue with opioids, which totally makes sense to me. Because if
Hmm.
you were coping with life's issues before your amputation by drinking and by seeking out a substance, that it makes sense that once you're hit with the whammy of an amputation and offered pills, that that's going to be the route that you go. But
Hmm.
help is available. We were talking about it real quick. 1-800-662-HELP.
Hmm.
1-800-662-HELP is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration helpline.
Hmm.
If you feel like you're having issues with your opioids and you are struggling, or you feel like perhaps you're using them for more than the physical pain, we encourage you to reach out and to get help. There's really no shame in that. And getting help for an opioid addiction when you have chronic pain does not mean that you have to live in pain.
No.
I'll say it again. Just because you stop taking the opioids if you have chronic pain does not mean that you have to live a life filled with pain. There are other options. You need to seek a doctor who is willing to explore the other options. Part of that, however, is being upfront with your doctor and saying, I think I might be misusing these pills. Can you help me? You need to talk to your doctor. Too many people are hiding these issues. These medications are very strong. If your doctor thinks you're on one dose and you're really double dosing, and you go and want to make a change and they don't know what you're really taking, you can really wreak havoc on your body and end up in a very, very bad situation.
Yeah.
If you're able to go to your doctor with that much self-awareness, then you should also have a plan. I've heard I can try this, I heard I can try that, I've heard I can try that, or I can try these things. And then have your doctor, yes, I can help you access that, or no, I've never heard of that. But I feel like having that level of self-awareness is
Hmm.
difficult when you're talking about addiction.
Yeah. I think too that if you are scared to stop because you're afraid of the pain, um, obviously your prosthetist can't treat you and can't do anything like that, but we can provide referral to a pain management doctor or somebody who is versed with amputees and limb pain and is qualified and capable of helping.
Yeah, I know that Cody or folks at Baker were um very straightforward with how to advocate for yourself. And that's, I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about here is self-advocacy.
Hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
if the doctor that's prescribing all your medications, like, no, you need to stay on that, then you need to secretly shop around for another doctor.
And say why.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
you
like,
have
this
to
is,
stay on that. Okay, explain to me why.
yeah, and
And what does this do that nothing else will do for me?
yes, sorry, that took me back to the hospital when they took all my vein access away, but I was still on a medication that they had to do blood draws to test for. And I'm like, okay, stop. So,
Let's think
um,
this through.
yeah, I'm like, surely there's a pill. So, but yeah, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself.
Never be afraid to advocate for yourself. You have to be your best advocate in every situation.
Mhm.
And there's no shame in asking for help. Again, 1-800-662-HELP is the number.
That's 4357.
Thank you.
Yes, I did look it up on my phone.
And we'll put it in the show notes at the end.
Yeah.
Cody,
I just,
final
yeah.
words?
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, you know, there's no shame in this. If you're really having pain, you really need to be checked out by a doctor. Make sure they're looking into various, causes of pain. But if you feel like you've exhausted all of that and there's no underlying cause, definitely reach out to your physician and your counselors, your psychologists, and everyone, and do a deep dive evaluation. There's no shame in figuring out yourself, figuring out where you are in life, and uncovering, the root cause of the misuse of opioids. Getting help and getting better. Those things are commendable. So, kudos to you if you're on that track, and we're here for you, also with resources and information, if you have that going on in your life. So please do rely on others.
You're not
Please.
alone. I
You're
think
not
that
alone.
the information that I found, if it tells me anything, it's that we're not alone, that there's a lot of amputees out there. There's a lot of people out there who are struggling with opioid misuse, not even abuse, not even addiction, just misuse, which is dangerous as well.
Yeah.
And you can get help for it.
Yeah.
And you can get help without living a life resigned in pain. So,
Absolutely.
all right. Brian, thank you so much for carving time out of your day to chat with us. Really, really appreciate it. It's always
Anytime.
great to get your perspective.
I appreciate it, and I'm happy to do it.
Really
Thank
good
you.
to see you. Thank you.
And Cody, as
Yeah.
always, and we'll catch you in October.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you all.
See you guys.